Breaking news. TCU has had another good week of practice. We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, also on your favorite podcast platform. Frogs take on Utah Saturday night at 9:30 Central Time. Well, the postgame show on probably early Sunday morning. I'm thinking around 1 a.m., but we'll go live, win or lose, after that Utah game. Hopefully we're talking about a team that's won and that is 4-3 on the season. They're coming off a bye week. Sonny Dykes made his first public comments in a while. Well, I guess he did the radio show with Brian Estridge on Monday at Railhead, but first press conference in a while. And he said they had a good week of practice. Technically, he said that on Monday night when he was asked. I think he said it was the most physical. Sunday was the most physical practice they've had all season. He said he liked what he saw from the team during the bye week, that they worked on some fundamental things, and that they got to a place. I'll say this. I know that it's become a meme and sort of a joke at this point, the constant discussion about good practice weeks that don't translate to good performances on the field. And my pal Matt Jennings, when he was on the show last time, he discussed that issue. And I saw him talking about it on social media as well. My thing is, people are so upset right now. And I'm not telling you, like, if you're upset with the state of the program, totally understand. You have a right to be. I think you should be. I think they should and can be better than this. And it's not to the standard that we want here. When things are going poorly like this, there's nothing the coach can say that's going to make people feel good. It's just not. Like, and that's not me making excuses for Sonny. It's just the reality is either they're going to figure this out on the field or they're not. And the only thing that people are going to accept is a better product on the field, more wins, and improvement in that regard. And if that starts to happen, then they'll live with whatever he says in the press conferences. If they keep losing, folks are going to get more and more frustrated. And I get it, but I'm sort of just at a place where, like, of all the things to criticize him about, this is one that I don't really see the need to. He's just talking in coach speak. I mean, he's getting asked every week about, hey, coach, how do you feel? Where are you at? Where's your team at? And, I mean, he's not going to – I think even if things weren't going well, he's not going to throw people under the bus publicly. And I don't really see the need to do that. So I don't take a lot from what he said because we're going to see what happens when they play Utah. Now, I do think this bye week has come at a good time. This past week I'm talking about. And I'm hopeful that they throw out some new wrinkles schematically on offense and defense so that they're in a better place when they play the Utes. But as far as, like, what they did practice-wise, intensity, all that stuff, I don't know. I wasn't there. I wouldn't take a lot from what he says. And it does feel like there's a disconnect between what's happening throughout the week and what's happening on Saturdays. And whether that's the coaching staff just not doing a good job of evaluating and understanding, like, hey, maybe we think this is working or we think this is a good week of practice in air quotes, but it's not really. Or for whatever reason, when the lights come on, guys just aren't performing at that level. I do think I feel like offensively there's something to be said about this defense has struggled. And I'm sure during fall camp, there were times where the offense looked really good and they were running the ball well. And it probably encouraged the offensive staff to say, hey, maybe we can do that, consistently throughout the year. I think the reality is they were running the ball or having success against a team that's not very good defensively. But the whole, like, assessing practice weeks, those comments publicly, I think it comes back to a point that I've made a few times, especially this season as things have kind of turned. Coaches' personalities. It comes down to winning or losing. If your team's winning, whatever image that your coach is projecting, whatever personality he's putting out there publicly, you find the positive spin on it. So a couple of years back, it was like, man, Sonny is he's the perfect guy for this job right now because he's a very player-friendly coach. He stepped in there and he's kind of letting them do their thing. He's giving them the freedom to police themselves and lead. And, he's got his thumb on the pulse of what's going on, but he's not micromanaging everybody. And that's his big strength. Now it's suddenly like he can't motivate. He can't, rip the paint off the walls, go in there and give an inspiring speech. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just think it really is totally dependent on what the results on the field are, how we feel about coaches and our perception of who they are as people. And maybe some of you will jump in the comments and say, no, I've always thought this was an issue, and that's fine. But I think the majority of folks, it's very conditional upon, what's happening on the football field. For years, for instance, Dabo Swinney was a media darling. People thought he was really funny. He had all these quirky phrases. He was a good old Southern guy that, had all these fun sayings and goofy personality and kind of had that fun dad energy. Last few years, Clemson has struggled, and suddenly people aren't feeling the vibe that Dabo's putting out there, right? It's all dependent on winning or losing. So if they find a way to turn this around, then I think people's perception of Sonny will change. And if they don't, then obviously he's on the hot seat already, but things are only going to continue to get more and more intense as the season progresses. So coming off the bye week, says they focused on fundamentals, had a good week of practice. The fundamental thing was intriguing to me. I do think there's something to be said, even though I really desire this team to come out with some different looks and some things that's going to confuse Utah a little bit. They can really improve. I don't know how much, but they can definitely improve by just cleaning up some basic things. I mean, missed tackles was a huge problem against Houston. It's been a problem in other games this year. And turnover margin-wise, I believe they're minus 10 in turnover margin this year, which is tied for 128th in the country, which is basically like the bottom of FBS. They turn the ball over way too much. They're not forcing turnovers. And Sonny discussed, some of the times it's just bad decisions. Sometimes he felt like guys were pressing, talked about guys fighting for extra yards. I think he's specifically talking about that J.P. Richardson fumble. And that was a huge turning point in the ballgame. I mean, as bad as it had gone, they had it at 24-12. They got a stop on defense. They got the ball back. And if they go down and score there and make it a 6-point game as the fourth quarter is getting underway, then you put a lot of pressure on Houston to execute down the stretch and make some big plays. But instead, they fumble. They give up a field goal. Suddenly, instead of a 12-point game, it's a 15-point game. But most importantly, Houston chewed up precious time off the clock when they were out there in that drive making plays. And so really put a damper on, what they were trying to do. So just cleaning up the turnovers, cleaning up the penalties, that could be really beneficial for this team. The mental block I have about that, it's become pretty clear over the last year plus that those are just kind of hallmarks of this team right now. So, I would love for it to change, and I think it can change in the short term. Like I see, they definitely had some games here or there where those things have taken care of themselves more and they protect the ball better, and it showed up on the scoreboard. But the week in and week out preparation and focus and just not allowing teams to get an advantage there with turnovers, with mental mistakes, unforced errors, it hasn't been there. And that's why that's what's giving me the biggest pause as far as, okay, what are we looking at towards the future? I feel like I'd be a lot more sold on the direction of the program if it was pretty evident, like, okay, you got some personnel issues, right? You're not great in the trenches, O-line, D-line. Have to improve there. It's going to take time. But you see a lot of the foundational elements of a good football team that are present, which is you're playing smart, you're tough, you're physical. Team's got a little bit of swagger, got edge, got an attitude to them. They're not hurting themselves each and every week. They're forcing teams to beat them by making plays. And I just haven't seen that from TCU as of late. So long-term wise, big picture wise, that's something that just concerns me moving forward. And he talked about Isaac Wilson and, the change of Cam Rising. He said Cam Rising being out changes the way they played and prepared for Utah a little bit. The offense is a little different with Wilson, but at the end of the day, they do what they do. I'm going to assume that they have a plan for both QBs. And I know Cam Rising's not going to play, but with the extra time to prepare, they should have had a lot of time to really scout and get to a place where it's like, all right, if we end up facing this guy, here's what we know about him. If we end up facing Cam, here's what the defense is going to look like. Here's what we know about him. So the defense is going to change a little bit. You got a true freshman out there, a quarterback who's turned the ball over a lot. TCU doesn't force a lot of turnovers. So a battle of weaknesses there. I'm hopeful that this is a week where, Andy Avalos, one of the reasons that TCU hired him was there's supposed to be a lot of variety in this defense, whether it's defensive fronts, creating matchups in the pass rush game, disguising coverages. I just feel like everything's been very vanilla so far. So if you're going to throw some intriguing concepts and disguise some things and try to trick offenses, this feels like a great week to do it because you're facing a QB that doesn't have a ton of experience. I'm sure by Saturday, maybe Sunday, he probably knew, all right, this is going to be my game. And he's played some, but still, it's kind of been back and forth on the bench, off the bench. Can you find ways to confuse him, to, let his eyes play tricks on him and put yourself in some advantageous situations? I think the biggest question defensively is, can you stop the run enough with Micah Bernard, their tailback, and this offensive line that they have? Can you stop the run enough that you force them to make plays in the passing game and you force Isaac Wilson? If you can do that, then I think this becomes a much more manageable football game. If that doesn't happen and they're just able to kind of stay on schedule and stick with the running game, then I think it gets a lot more complicated because it puts more pressure on your offense to really be efficient and kind of go score for score. So TCU and Utah this upcoming week. For ours, we're getting some people back. We'll talk about who it is and what that could mean next here in Lockdown Horned Frogs, your team every day. As always, I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors, Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I'm perusing the Gametime app now. I was actually looking at – my dad's a North Texas grad, and Army's coming to Denton in a few weeks. Army's undefeated currently. North Texas with Chandler Morris at QB, they've got one loss. So I was actually looking around today at hey, what are tickets for that Army-North Texas game? Because I might see if my dad wants to go and get up there for that. But obviously, plenty of TCU sporting events, including TCU football. If you want tickets to that Tech game is a hot ticket because, as you know, we're keeping those Red Raiders out of our stadium, so they're trying to find a way in through the secondary market. Also, TCU at Baylor later this year in Waco. That game's available. Oklahoma State at TCU. All of it's there on the Gametime app. The great thing about the Gametime app, they give you a view of what you're going to see from your seat so that you're not fooled there. Again, that promo code is LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The tickets go straight to your phone. It's not complicated. They make it easy for you. Gametime, best place to get tickets. We appreciate their sponsorship of the Locked On Network. Sonny Dykes also mentioned that they got some guys healthy this week. Javon McIver, the corner, transferred in from Austin Peay this offseason. Hasn't played a lot yet. With the injuries at corner, though, and just with some of the issues you've had, Travis Broughton, which revenge game for him as he returns back to Utah and to his old coach Kyle Whittingham to play against the Utes. But I think having McIver available is good just from a depth perspective. Hot take there. Mainly because, okay, if you're having issues at corner, whether it's McIver, Canada, Lamarian James on the other side has done a pretty nice job, even though it's kind of coming off a rough game against Houston. I feel like throwing different guys out there in some limited snaps can help you. Make sure you keep guys fresh, give these receivers some different looks, and just keep everybody on their toes. So if McIver can give you a quality some quality snaps while Travis Broughton's on the sidelines, Shanny Cannon's on the sidelines, and you can keep those guys kind of rotating in and out, keep them fresh throughout the game, that could be a really big deal. So he's available on Saturday, it appears. Also Trent Battle, which is an exciting name to see. Trent's been out pretty much all season long. Now, I think the big factor for Trent is his availability, on special teams, and not even in the return game, but he's good on, punt coverage team. He's good on kickoffs. All those little things that maybe not everybody kind of sees or shows up in the stat sheet. He's an effective player. He's been really effective through the years in that role. The running back room is super confusing to me right now. I don't know. I think Jeremy Payne's going to get some more run. Cam Cook has obviously been your main back all season long. Trey Sanders has pretty much disappeared from being involved. Dominic Johnson has seen his workload kind of go down throughout the rest of the year. Battle's a guy that I think he's done some nice things early in his career. And I feel like he's another option, especially on third downs, when you can use his ability to catch the ball in the backfield. And that's where he's, I guess, excelled on offense at least. But he's available. So that's good to know. And then Shad Banks at the linebacker spot. And I think they've missed him. I think they've missed his depth, his physicality, just what he brings to that position. So he'll be available. Hopefully he can give Johnny Hodges some spells here and there. Caleb Delarmzor has been good. Nnamdi Obaizor has struggled this year. I'm not sure what his availability is. But Shad Banks, a linebacker, Javon McIver at corner, and then Trent Battle at running back, all coming back from injury, will be available this week. Sonny also said that when asked about kind of changes personnel-wise and where they're at there, he said that some guys played their way into more snaps. So I don't know who that is. He didn't mention specific names. I would think Jeremy Payne is the guy that would be a prime candidate for that, given what he's done lately. They shuffled around the O-line a little bit in that Kansas game, gave Remington Strickland more opportunities. Defensively, they've been giving Marcus Deal on the D-line more snaps. It's something to watch. Dalen Wright wasn't even mentioned this week from what I could tell in the presser. When I watched it, I didn't hear his name called, so I'm not sure what the status is with him. I think TCU is pretty loaded at receiver anyway, so, if there's a spot where you don't necessarily need more people, that's one of them. That's one of the few. But, yeah, Javon McIver, Shad Banks, and Trent Battle, all available. And as far as those guys, like who can make the biggest impact, I think McIver can help in the secondary, but it might be Battle just because it doesn't feel like there's many guys in that running back room that this coaching staff trusts right now. And he's been a trustworthy player for them for a few seasons. So just him being back in the lineup and being available for some snaps could help this team out some. He's veteran presence. So, and it's just, it's good. Like, these guys have been fighting back from injury. It's good to see that they're back and they're available for this upcoming game. And he talked about the environment at Utah Stadium. Tough place to play. It's going to be a night game. They've been working on that too. So we're getting closer, guys. We're getting closer to having football again and getting to see like what this team has worked on over the past few weeks. When we come back, we'll wrap things up with some of your reaction. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thank you to our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is where you need to go if you're trying to get in the sports betting world. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Again, that's FanDuel.com, or you can download the FanDuel app. One $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. Just one $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's an outstanding deal. You cannot beat that type of return on your investment. And it's the best time of year to be a sports fan. NHL just got underway. College football still in full swing. NFL. College basketball starting up soon. The NBA preseason's going on. Games will start here in about a week. It's all there for you. And it's just one $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. So throw a $5 bet down and get some money to play around with. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel, official betting partner of the National Football League and official sponsor of the Locked On Network. So on yesterday's show, I discussed that we've got 12 games of Josh Hoover now. Like, he's played essentially a full regular season in college football. And obviously got the back half of the schedule to go. And I was sort of assessing, like, all right, where is he at? What does he do well? Where does he struggle? Landman on YouTube says, I really enjoy watching Hoover. He's deadly accurate when he stays in the pocket. He isn't great when he starts pressing and scrambling around. His best days are still ahead. Hopefully the team will set him up for success. I think it's a great point about how his best days could still be ahead of us. I mean, he is still relatively inexperienced. And I don't think he was a guy that was – I'm sure he probably in his mind was like, yeah, I'm going to play a lot early on. I don't know if the coaching staff expected him to play this early. But, yeah, I think there's definitely room for some growth and development there. And there's some untapped potential we haven't seen, like Josh Hoover at full force yet. And that's probably the biggest reason to be excited about 2025, regardless of kind of what's going to go on behind the scenes, even though if you do make a wholesale coaching change, that puts a lot of the future of these guys kind of in peril. But with like an experienced offensive line coming back, more experienced quarterback, that all seems like a recipe for success. And you're right. He does press at times, and I've talked about that. I think when he gets in some shootouts and some games where there's obviously pressure for the offense to go score, then he makes some bad decisions. But, again, hopefully with maturity and time, he can find a way to handle that better and maybe take a check down or maybe scramble. Just find some ways to not turn the ball over. Bentley said we need more short passes to Jack Besh. I think he has the ability to break tackles and gain first downs. I guess I hadn't thought about that. And he is good after the catch. So using him in the screen game could be effective. I've been kind of banging the drum for a couple of years now of using Savion more in those situations too, just because I think he's got kind of an angry streak when he runs. And he's typically not going to get taken down with first tackle. But, yeah, with the issues running the ball, you need to find ways in the quick passing game to supplement your run game for it to be an extension of your run game. And so that's one way to do it. And Jack Besh is very shifty. He's shown the ability, especially when guys take bad angles, to make them pay with that speed to the outside. So I'd be all for it. I'm all for high percentage throws that get you positive yards. because that was lacking in this past game against Houston. Jack Daddy Slim says Hoover's issue seems to be his confidence, especially when he's under pressure, but it's hard to play perfectly when the entire offense consistently gets put on your shoulders because of the lack of run game. Look at the Houston game. They were getting home with 3 rushers. The offensive linemen haven't looked great in any situation. So I'll give Hoover the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, he's been dealt a tough hand in some ways. And when you're running for your life, it's tough to make plays. It's tough to just be consistently on target. And so that's all understandable. I do think, some of that's on him. You got to make good decisions even in the face of pressure. But we're still talking about a guy who's kind of learning on the job to a certain extent. And so that's a tough thing to do. Again, I think it's an area where he can definitely get better throughout the rest of his career. Vince Pryor says Josh is a pocket passer who happens to throw a lot of slant or crossing patterns, mostly, in my opinion, timing patterns. My question is, what happened to the hurry-up offense? Wasn't that a Bryles thing? Bryles is only good when he has a version of RG3 or KJ Jefferson. Prove me wrong. KJ Jefferson had success with Kendall, in the run game for sure. I believe Philip Montgomery was play caller when RG3 was the quarterback. Maybe you're just talking about dual threat type guys, which Bryce Petty, Seth Russell, they could run a little bit. I think you're totally dead on about it's a lot of timing routes. It's a lot of short and intermediate throws that are designed to be high percentage. And he is more your prototypical pocket passer. I think there's something there with his legs and the run game, but he hasn't shown it a whole lot. And so, it hasn't been an effective part of the offense to this point. And then finally, off track, says if Hoover had a running game and a defense that wouldn't get 500-plus yards, he wouldn't have to play with so much urgency to make things happen. Opposing defenses know that TCU is one-dimensional, and we can't stop the run against opposing offenses. I hope this gets figured out, but until then, I feel like he's going to be put in undesirable situations. Yeah, as some other people have pointed out, he didn't come into the ideal situation. Like, he came in to a team that was discouraged and their quarterback just got hurt in Chandler Morris. But I think that being said, he's handled all this well. And that might be my biggest reason for optimism moving forward is he's hung in there. He's still making plays. And I feel like with a good and competent team around him, Josh is someone who can be really effective. It's just about finding the right pieces, especially along the offensive line. We'll be back again tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. Your team every day. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.